Hey there, humans! I want to wish everyone a happy Juneteenth and a happy Pride Month before we get into the meat of today's video. Today we're going to be talking about the graphic novel Angola Janga by Marcelo, which recounts the history of Palmares, also known as Angola Janga, during its last 10 years of war with the Portuguese colonizers in northern Brazil. Palmares was an independent group of communities which were located in the modern state of Alagoas from 1605 to 1694. Formed and led by African people who had escaped slavery at the hands of the Portuguese, the communities of Palmares brought together Africans, indigenous peoples, and even some Europeans to form a racially egalitarian society. During its nearly 100 years of existence, the people of Palmares actively fought back against their colonial oppressors, and Angola Janga recreates this war in vivid detail. Angola Janga follows the story of Zumbi and his rise to power in Palmares, beginning with his birth as his parents fled captivity. Told primarily through the eyes of Suarez, one of Zumbi's right hands, we experience the turmoil within the people of Palmares when the Portuguese offer a peace deal to their leader Ganga Zumba. In exchange for his mother's life, they must relocate to Cucaú and surrender those born as slaves to the Portuguese. While some side with Ganga Zumba and relocate, a faction led by the younger Zumbi dissents. Ultimately, the Portuguese are able to exploit this internal conflict in order to overthrow Palmares completely. From its first inception to its finish, Marcelo spent over 10 years immersing himself in the history of Palmares in order to write Angola Janga. And the result is a powerful testament to the warriors who devoted their lives to the liberation and protection of enslaved Africans. Though this century of rebellion did not end the enslavement of Africans in Brazil, its history has provided, and continues to provide, hope and inspiration to the Afro-descendant population of Brazil and beyond. Here in the United States, many of us are geared up and ready to celebrate Juneteenth, which marks the official end of legal slavery in Texas and in the country in 1865. Brazil would have to wait another 23 years before abolition, which was granted by the Brazilian monarchy via imperial law. As we celebrate Juneteenth here, let's also focus on the ongoing global struggle for equality and the work that was done to achieve it in Angola Janga. I'm going to look at that one first. Hey there, humans. I'm Magarthea, and today we have the incredible fortune to have not just the English translation, but the Polish translation of Angola Janga, and also my lovely PhD advisor, Dr. Anna Klobucka. And we're going to chat about the Polish translation of Angola Janga. So, what did you think of the book?
Well, I think I need to explain first that I wanted to buy Angola Janga when you decided to write about it. So since I had heard about it, but I'd never read it. I don't even remember if I looked in libraries, but in any case, I thought it would be a neat thing to actually purchase. And when I went online to look for ideally a used copy, but even new, whatever, I discovered there was a Polish translation, and weirdly, it turned out to be actually the cheapest edition that was available out there, even with shipping costs. Mm-hmm. So that's what I got, and I thought it would be interesting to read it in a different language and see how the translation worked, and it was very interesting, mainly because the book itself is amazing. It's just such an ambitious undertaking, such a wide scope, and so much artistry that's very sophisticated and hard-hitting going into it. And then when I know a lot more about Marcel Salette than I do, but I did learn that he worked on this project for a very long time while he was publishing other smaller stories in the graphic format, and this was a labor of around 10 years, if not more than that. So it certainly explains the magnitude of the canvas that he paints. It's extremely thoroughly researched. There's a lot of historical substance that goes into it, which is also presented to the reader through the glossary, through chronology, through an essay by the author in the back, which explains the actual historical record. And throughout, also in each chapter or each unit, as it were, of the book, there is introduced with a couple of quotations from contemporary sources, from 17th century mainly, but also from other centuries. Mostly Brazilian documents that have to do with the slave revolt and the quilombos, the whole Palmares story, but also have to do with the wider story of Portuguese colonialism in Brazil and the extermination of native populations and the importation of enslaved Africans and all those bigger stories that feed into the story of Angola Janga.
I think when I read it the first time, because I've read it 3 times now, twice in Portuguese and once in English. I'm so special. But the first time I read it, I found those quotations a little overwhelming, but I thought they were really important to like set that scene and provide that historical context. And in the English translation especially, I thought that it was really important to have that, because this is the history of a country that is not English speaking, and for an English edition, having that context is extra beneficial for the readers. But another aspect of it is definitely that glossary at the end. The other day I just sat down and I read the glossary straight through, and I was like, I learned so much that if I had skipped that glossary, like, I wouldn't have learned.
Yeah, I think it was done partly maybe with the translations in mind, because readers who are not Brazilian or not Portuguese native speakers would certainly know less about this history than others. But on the other hand, it's not like this history is 100%, present in the
Right.
kind of general Brazilian culture.
Right.
I mean, it is much more present now than it was in the past.
It's like a really popular topic for like historical fiction novels or movies, but I don't know if it's actually something that people learn about in school. I mean, I don't know. I did not go to school in Brazil. So if you're Brazilian and you grew up in Brazil and you went to school in Brazil, was Palmares mentioned in your history class ever? Let me know in the comments. Everything that I've read about it, it seems to me like something that is mythologized more so than taught as an actual history.
Right, and I think here we have both, right? We definitely have an artistic vision and a particular narrative take on the story, but we also have a very present concern with the historical substance, the actual record, the veracity, the documents that are drawn on, and the preoccupation with actually educating the reader in what in fact happened, and then taking the reader on this journey through a reimagined history, because it certainly wasn't the kind of story that Salete tells here. Certainly wasn't part of mainstream official Brazilian history for a very, very long time. So there is, even though the story has become very popular and much more present in the popular consciousness than had been before, it's still not necessarily mainstream official history, right? That penetrates throughout, and certainly not outside of Brazil, right? Because the entire history of enslaved people's resistance to colonialism in the Americas, but elsewhere as well, is still submerged to a considerable extent in official history of different post-colonial nations. So I think it's a similar situation here.
So in general, did you enjoy reading the book in Polish? What were your general feelings about the experience of reading this very Brazilian novel in Polish and the translation itself?
Yeah, so it was strange for me, but very enjoyable, interesting in that I kept querying myself about things. And I should explain that I emigrated from Poland in 1986, so a really long time ago, and I have not worked in Polish since then, except for private communications. I have not really used the language for writing or academic work or anything like that. I work primarily in Portuguese. Of course, I live in the United States, so those are my two, English and Portuguese are my two languages. So I don't really get to, I occasionally read books in Polish, but almost never read books in Polish that have to do with my area of academic interest and study. And although I'm not a Brazilianist, I of course have learned Brazilian history and have read at least one other novel that also has to do with reinventing the legacy of Palmares. The Angolan author José Eduardo Agualusa's novel O Ano em que Zumbi Tomou o Rio, the year when Zumbi captured Rio, which is a kind of a counter. What's the proper word for it? It's a novel that happens in the present, but it's an alternative present. It's counterfactual.
Alternative history.
Alternative history, if you will, right?
In
any case, the Brazil it depicts is very recognizable, but the events aren't aren't historical, but it draws on a lot of historical material. And the story of Zumbi de Palmares is kind of reinvented for the present day Rio de Janeiro, right? And so I've been familiar with the tradition, but reading about it in Polish was very, very different. And even seeing words and expressions and thinking to myself, oh, that's what it must be in Portuguese, and now that's how it sounds in Polish, and so forth. I just want to say that translation is excellent. It's as I did not even know when I was purchasing the book, and I realized later it's done by somebody who is very, very well informed, who teaches in my old department at the University of Warsaw, where he earned his MA and his PhD many years after me, but we have that in common. Well, not the earning of the PhD, which I did in the States, but studying there. And now he is on the faculty of my old department. And he was a comic book enthusiast from very young age, and he kept up this interest while he studied Portuguese in college, and then became a translator as well. He actually did both his MA thesis and PhD dissertation on the genre of comic and graphic novel in Portuguese, and he now teaches translation and teaches comic books in many different curricular settings, as it were, and is actually a scholar of this genre, in addition to working on the side as a translator from Portuguese, from Spanish, and even from English. He translates a wide variety of comics, including Marvel superheroes. So it's in that sense, it's a perfect translator. It's somebody who knows a lot about the form and who is deeply invested in the form, but also in the history and culture of the Portuguese-speaking world. So I have to say that the book had very, very good fortune to fall into the hands of this translator, who actually promoted its publication in Poland. He explains in an interview that I read that he was waiting for it to come out because he'd heard Marcelo talk about it on occasions where they were in the same event or conference or something, and he was waiting eagerly for the book to come out, and as soon as it did, he convinced the publisher to take it up. And so I think it's an excellent translation, and the experience of reading it in Polish was very strange at first, but also very compelling, very interesting for me. So it was fun. Thank you for making me do it. Well, not making me read it in Polish, but making me read it.
Well, thank you for reading it in Polish, because as soon as you told me that the cheapest version was the Polish translation, I was shocked. I was like, man, That is so cool. That's so different. I immediately knew that I wanted to do something with all three of these books in the same place because how I mean, there are lots of books that get translated into multiple languages, but this book just came out a couple of years ago and it's already in a lot of languages. And that's, to me, that's a little bit mind blowing that we have this opportunity to just sit down and chat about multiple translations of the same book. And it makes me happy. It just makes me happy.
Yeah, I think that Marcelo won a major award before publishing Angola Janga, so I expect that there was already an expected or some kind of sphere of prospective publishers and translators waiting for him to come out with the next book, because it always helps with marketing when the author is award winning. But nonetheless, it's pretty cool that 2 years after the book coming out, we already have this this wide range of circulation in different languages.
Yeah. Again, it just makes me happy.
Yeah. I would actually love to ask Jakub, cześć Jakub, if he talked about the book with Polish readers, if there were any events where he was able to gauge the kind of reception the book was having, and that would be very interesting to know how it is being read in Poland, right?
Yeah.
Which is a very different environment from either Brazil or the United States.
Yeah. So I know that you said that you immigrated here in 1986, but to the best of your knowledge, what's kind of like the major differences between the publishing scene in Poland and the publishing scene in the United States? Because I imagine it can't be the same.
Yeah, no, it isn't, and a lot of it has changed, obviously, since Poland became a capitalist country a few years after I left. I mean, the publishing has been dramatically transformed for obvious reasons, but some things have not actually changed. And what's very different about Poland from the United States when it comes to literary translation, or really any translation, is that in Poland a lot of books in translation are published.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know the numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if more books in translation were published than books originally written in Polish, generally speaking. And as we know, in the United States, the percentage of translated books, like in the entire universe of publishing, is minuscule, something like 3% or something in that range. So there already you have this incredibly different attitude towards cultural content, because it goes beyond books. It goes, to visual media and others. Cultural content that comes to you in translation. In Poland, if you don't read in translation, you basically have no access to the bulk of world literature, sticking now to literature and everything else really that happens. So we, from the earliest age, we always grew up knowing that we had to learn languages, and that we read books in translation because that's what was out there, right? And that hasn't changed. So there is a different kind of publishing market, certainly, and different kinds of books get translated.
Right.
It wasn't even necessarily political in the sense that some books, couldn't be published before 1989, which certainly was the case, but also the selection of books to publish in translation wasn't driven by the market at all, right? So it was driven by cultural elites deciding what was worth translating, and some lighter genres were translated. Like there was a lot of detective novels, and crime as a genre was very popular, and a lot of that got translated. But science fiction as well, a lot of science fiction was getting translated from English and from other languages. But but for the most part, it was kind of the high level, high prestige literature that got green lighted. And now, of course, the thriving market is romance novels and comics. We did have comics, but they were mostly Polish language comics, and they were very popular. But I don't remember comics in translation really then. And now there's lots of it. I mean, it's a very, very popular genre, and I can tell that there's a big avid population of comic book and graphic novel readers in Poland. The genre itself has flourished in Polish language, but also there's a lot of translation happening. So again, I don't know how in that specific genre it differs from the US scene, but certainly when it comes to translation in general, it differs hugely, which is the case in all countries with languages that are not widely spoken. Those countries and those cultures are very used to existing in translation and to accessing readers outside of their own cultural sphere through translation only, right? Whereas American authors are also widely read in the original language as well as translated.
So as someone who has worked in a lot of like Portuguese to English translation, but whose background is very Polish, how does it make you feel to see books like, I know you talked about before like the sense of like queering yourself while reading the book. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I thought that was like an interesting point.
Yeah, so I have to say I don't, like I said before, I don't really read books in Polish that I can read in Portuguese, for example, or that I can read in English. If I have even, I have to say, because I've lived in the US for 35 years now, it's a lot more natural for me to buy a book that was originally written, say, in Japanese, which I don't read, in English translation rather than in Polish or even in Portuguese translation, right? Which is a whole different story. So this was a pretty unique experience in that sense, but I liked it. I think I may do more of it. I'm probably not going to be ordering books from Poland online for that purpose, but the next time I go, I may seek out something. There was, for instance, a recent translation of essays by the wonderful Brazilian journalist and essayist Eliane Brum that was translated into Polish by Gabriel Borowski and is now nominated for an award for 10 best nonfiction books published in Poland. So fingers crossed. And either way, it's clear that it has had a very good reception and good readership. I've seen some excellent reviews. So I want to, because I love reading Eliane Brum in Portuguese, and I know that Gabriel is a very, very good translator from other sources. So I may want to buy it and see how it feels to read it.
That's one of my favorite things about being able to read more than one language is being able to compare the translation with the original.
Right.
I enjoy it.
Yeah,
so
me
much.
too. Although I have to say it's distracting because you want to kind of immerse yourself. You want to think about what's happening in the book, and instead of that, you're just paying attention to the translator's choices. So I'm ambivalent about that. But, and the queering aspect is actually very useful because it sometimes makes me, I can't think of any examples right now, but sometimes it makes me realize things that I forgot about my native language because I haven't really used it very much, and even though my reading comprehension remains perfect really, with minor maybe like some vocabulary that just came into use in the last 20 years or something. I sometimes feel this kind of estrangement, the effect that arises from encountering something that is unexpected, that is not part of the willing suspension of disbelief that we activate when we enter a literary work, right? You are kind of jerked out of it and realizing that, well, you're reading a translated work, or you're reading a piece of literature rather than just experiencing it directly, right? So reading in Polish, I quite often have that feeling, like this is a turn of phrase that I somehow didn't remember, or that I I know exists, but I managed to forget, and then I start thinking about my own relationship to the language, and it all gets very messy, and I'm no longer paying attention to the text, and so forth and so on. So yeah, there's definitely a sense of estrangement, and maybe queerness is a good word for it too.
Happy Pride Month.
Baby, I'm so deep.